Wild West world of podcasting, there is one podcast that is authentic and genuine and continues to stand tall in its originality. Based on a passion for his guests, their work, and his love of podcasting, Derek Thomas and Monday Morning Critic Podcast get amazing, diverse, unique guests found nowhere else. The variety and quality are endless. There is something for everyone. Derek Thomas is the hero you deserve. He's a silent guardian, a watchful protector. Welcome to Monday Morning Critic Podcast. Here is Derek Thomas.
Welcome to Monday Morning Critic Podcast. I am indeed Derek Thomas. This is episode 245. That is my daughter, Lucy. We are rapidly approaching episode 250. If Apple Podcast says it, then it must be true, but I swear I've done more than 250 interviews. But again, if Apple Podcast says it, then it must be true. Today's guest is actor Steve Coulter. Wonderful actor, absolutely talented, strong filmography. I really love this conversation. Yes, we both love this conversation. Steve was a pleasure to talk to, gave me so much of his time, so much insight, the stories, the highlights. Again, wonderful filmography, actor you've seen in a lot of great projects, and most importantly, just a good human being to speak with. And that's what I love most about many of my interviews. If you're looking to get a hold of me on Instagram, it's Monday Morning Critic Podcast. Facebook, it's Monday Morning Critic Podcast. My website is mmcpodcast.com. And speaking of social media, later today on Facebook, I'll be posting some decals that I had made of Monday Morning Critic Podcast. Really well done. If you would be willing to put one on your car or someplace where people could see it, I certainly would be honored by that gesture, and I would really appreciate that. So please reach out to me. My email is mondaymorningcritic@gmail.com, or send me a DM, and I would certainly send you one out for free. I would be so honored with that gesture. They're really classy, really well done. They're not cheesy. They're not hokey. I think they're really great to look at. Again, and I would be so honored if you would do that. But please reach out to me. Give me your address and information. I'll send those out right away. And finally, before I send you to the interview, this is the last season of The Walking Dead, which should premiere, I think, in a few weeks. Very important to have this interview out there. Steve had an important role as Reg. Again, really love this interview. I hope you love it as well. And if you love the interviews, or you like some of what I'm putting out or all of what I'm putting out, I really would appreciate if you hit subscribe on iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts, where the interviews can kind of come automatically to your phone or device, or whatever you listen to. So I would really appreciate that as well. And I realize I'm asking an awful lot of you guys today, so thank you for sticking with me. So without further ado, the very talented Steve Coulter. Actor and writer Steve Coulter has such a wonderful and lengthy filmography, which includes Conjuring 2013 as Father Gordon, The Walking Dead as Reg Monroe, Banshee as Elijah Bowman, First Man as Gunther Wendt, Annabelle Comes Home as Father Gordon, The Hunt, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, Flight with Denzel Washington. I am leaving many off this wonderful list. Please welcome Steve Coulter. Steve, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, Steve, I am following this wonderful path here. So I think a filmography is very important, as I led off the interview with. But I also think, Steve, what's very important is the path someone has in their own personal life. And I'm trying to piece yours together, and I can't do it. So I know you're a Canada guy. Big win, by the way, in women's soccer yesterday. You also grew up in South America and Ohio. Could you please, if you don't mind, fill in the gaps there? Because I'm trying to put that timeline together.
Well, I was lucky that, and curiously, a lot of actors particularly are like military, family. And I wasn't that. I didn't have to move around a lot, because when we did move, we stayed. But I was born in Canada, outside of Montreal, and left when I was very young, 3. But I've kept my Canadian citizenship all these years just because, I don't know, it's my heritage, and I'm very fond of the darn country. My dad moved to, we were about an hour outside of New York, and it's really interesting is that, and unfortunately he passed away before the show came on, but if you remember Mad Men.
Oh, of course.
And the length of that show, it starts in 1962, I believe, and ends in 69. And that's exactly, except for not being in advertising, that was my dad's life. He worked in New York City. He actually worked in the Time Life building like the main character did later on in the series. And we were there for till I was about 9. And it was one of those, I know a lot of actors had disturbing childhoods. And I had kind of a iconically great. It was like a little dead end street, and all the kids were my age, and we played. All we did was we played pretend and baseball, and we had a pond, and we swam, and it's the kind of thing that you may have grown up this way too. You left the house at 7 a.m. You maybe came home for lunch, and then came home for dinner, and then you played baseball in someone's backyard till you couldn't see the ball anymore. And then they called you. Actually, the only time I ever got called Steven is when I was supposed to be home. But then my dad, when I was 9, he took a job down in Colombia, South America. That's where the South America comes in. And it was back, it was 1969. And Colombia was very safe. It was a little dicey for diplomats' kids. We'd been there about a month when I think the Swiss ambassador's son was kidnapped. But apart from that, it was weird because we were like middle-class family and we lived in the States. But for 4 years in South America, we got to sort of be rich because of the way the peso worked, and my dad's company gave him a lot of stuff that, but then we went back to Cleveland, Ohio, went back to being normal, I guess. But it was a great experience because you got, I went to a really cool school that had kids from Colombia and Switzerland and Greece. And, I got fluent in Spanish, which came in real handy when I moved to New York in my 20s, and also came in very handy on a shoot, which I can tell you about in a little while, this winter. We're in the Dominican Republic. But yeah, like our teachers, all the teachers at the school were mostly ex-Peace Corps workers. So they're really very cool people, and they wanted to be there. And well, then I moved back to Cleveland Heights, Ohio, which was a real culture shock. It was like, 9th grade. I didn't know anybody. I didn't even know what a click was. I remember I was listening to the radio back when people listened to the radio the night before school started, and it was like a call-in show of kids that were nervous going back to school, and they said, "I'm afraid of the clicks." And I was like, "What the hell is a friggin' click?" I thought it was some kind of, I don't know, it was armed evildoers.
Right.
But that's where, and Cleveland was just sort of normal. That's where I really kind of got into acting. I'd done a little bit in South America. I saw a play down there, and I just thought, this is effing cool. And then in high school, I did plays, and then I realized it was one of the few things I was kind of good at. I wanted to be a baseball player, but when I was in South America, we didn't play baseball. By the time I moved back to the States, kids were throwing curveballs. And I was like, what the hell is that? When I left, it was fun. Now they're trying to kill me. But yeah, acting's the thing. I just, like all of us, we find something we really like and we're kind of good at. And then I realized you could study to do it. And I went to a conservatory. It's kind of like in the same group of schools that Juilliard's in. It's North Carolina School of the Arts. And it's like a 4-year, they teach you combat, singing, dialects, Shakespeare, modern theater, and stuff like that. And then I headed to New York I was there about 8 years. And then I got a job down in Atlanta that I thought I'd just go back to New York, but then I ended up staying here, and I've been here for like 30 years now.
Yeah, and that was just a kind of a fluke to Atlanta, right? That was kind of, you went to see a friend, right? And that's...
Yeah, how did you know that? My God. Yeah, I did. I was visiting. We spoke about the Berkshires. I worked at the Berkshires Theater Festival, my first sort of job. And I had met a friend. There were only about 6 of us in this company. And we were like apprentices kind of thing. We understudied the stars in the main productions. But this friend of mine was really great person, great actress. And she happened to be in Atlanta. I was visiting my folks. I was down from New York because they lived about an hour out of Atlanta. And this friend of mine who I hadn't seen in like 4, 5, 6 years, she was doing a play. And she said, "Why don't you come down? We'll go grab some lunch, and then you can stick around and see the play." And I was driving down from like North Georgia. I didn't know Atlanta. I got there a little early and she wasn't ready yet. So she said, while she was getting ready, I saw there was a script on her coffee table. And I started reading it. It was really funny. And I asked her, what's this? She goes, it's this play they're doing at the Alliance Theater, which is the big sort of union theater in town. She said, you should crash the audition. And I was like, nah, I'm going back to New York. She said, no, go ahead, crash the audition. And so I did. And long story short, I got that part. And it was a long run, like 3 months. It was the longest I'd been out of New York City in like 8 years. And ended up sticking around and had children. And I kept thinking I was going to go back to New York, but I never did, or moved to LA. And then the film business really, so I started writing, and I was Tyler Perry's head writer for a few years. And then I got back to acting. I'd been sort of acting during that too, a little bit. But yeah, all because she wasn't ready to go to lunch. But I do. There's just so much that's not in our control. The stuff, weird little circumstances that, you happen to see this person across the room, or, you look back and it's kind of like, it's kind of calming, I think, to realize there's a lot that, the universe is taken care of and you have no part in.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, there's those little moments that we can't predict no matter how much school we have or luck. It's just fluky and it just works out. That's a great point. Just a couple things you touched on. And I know you said your dad passed, but do you think your dad would have loved Mad Men, the show?
Oh my God. He would have, it had everything he liked. It was very authentic. The rawness of it, the humor in it, the darkness. Yeah, I think it would have been like looking in a mirror.
I could almost, I could almost smell that secondhand smoke, Steve. You could just for that show. You're right. The rawness of it. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, you're right.
No, but that was it, and it's true. Like I remember, one of my chores around the house was emptying ashtrays. I mean, people, that's what people. My dad, I think, smoked. Unfortunately, that's what I think eventually killed him. But they smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day. They inhaled that stuff and the drinks and all that stuff. Oh yeah, he would have that would have been. Oh yeah, I remember when it came out, I was like, oh man, I wish he was still here. Yeah, I wish he was still here for other reasons, but he would have loved it.
No, I completely understand that. I feel the same way with my dad. And, it's funny that you brought up, when we outside, the concept of being outside and playing, it's just, I feel like I sound so old when I say this. I do feel like it's lost on the current generation because I feel like, you and I are in the same ballpark when it comes to age. And, when those lights went on, that meant it was, game was over. We're done playing Army. We had somebody in our neighborhood. There's somebody in our neighborhood, Steve, when I was a kid. I ended up buying my parents' house, but I remember this, and it was a great, just 5 streets connected, and they lived so far away. And when it was time for those kids to come home, there was a horn that went off. It was almost like a military base.
Man.
Yeah. But what I wanted to get to you is you brought up a good point, right? Playing war. I remember, watching things with my father, like The Dirty Dozen, Great Escape, Kelly's Heroes. That's the stuff that I love playing. I mean, I'm not going to knock video games because I think they're great. I think that this generation is blessed to have such advanced technology. But there's something to be said about being a kid in that way. Stevie, we mentioned all the other stuff. Do you feel like, playing war and being that kind of kids being kids, do you think that affected your wanting to be an actor?
No, that's it. That's absolutely because, and in a way, when I get, like esoteric about it, I go, oh yeah, that was the roots of it. But in another sense, it's like, I just never wanted to stop doing that because, and sometimes like I was just doing this, I can't say the name of it, but I was all summer long, I was shooting a Marvel series and that's what it felt like. It was like being 10, 8, 11 years old, whatever. Oh, absolutely. Cause that's all we did. We were always pretending. And, it was like, it was always weird. Of course, I realized when I was a kid, like 60s, World War II was 20 years before, which is insane. But that's what, we played Army or Time Tunnel or Cops and stuff. But Army a lot. There was a lot of war and we'd take pits and traps and and stuff. And whenever one of my favorite things to do is like when I did The Hunt is getting to shoot stuff. It's like I'm a grown up now, and so many actors I know, I remember talking to Patrick Wilson about it and people, we just go, can you believe they are paying us money to basically play pretend? I mean, it's harder than that, but it is a direct connection. And I even remember when I moved to South America, I sort of became an only child because my brothers and sisters were much older and they were in the States. And so, but I would get bored with like day-to-day life. We had a lot of driving trips and stuff. So I used to pretend that my real parents had been killed. and that, so I was an orphan, but there was this other couple, my parents in real life, that I had been hired to be their bodyguard and act as their son. So it made the day-to-day more interesting. And I still feel that. It's like when I'm not acting, I miss that rush of that whatever pretend hormone is or whatever. So it's a direct link to that. I think I just never wanted to stop doing it.
No, I love hearing I love hearing stuff like that. And you mentioned another thing that I did want to ask you about was, the award-winning writing you did for Tyler Perry, House of Payne, Meet the Browns. How do you view, I could clearly see how you view acting. Do you view writing the same way? Because writing, and I feel like for people who kind of love movies, I cannot stress enough how important, or television shows, how important writing is, right? It's like building a house without a foundation.
Yeah, it's really odd because it's anything that is good, it's a good script. You look at Godfather, you look at any really good film, it's beginning, middle, and end. It's solid. It's like a solid house. And some movies, I forget what film it was recently I saw, and it just kind of ended. And it was sort of like walking into a house and seeing that the back wall was missing.
Yeah.
And it's really, really, it is the architecture of, and it's just basically, stories have principles. And I don't mean screenplays. I mean, any good story has a beginning, middle, and end. It's got suspense. And the main thing it has is conflict. It's your hero is trying to solve these certain problems and to get to the thing he wants or she wants. And so it's really like when I was head writer, I was a staff writer for 2 years, and then Tyler made me head writer, and he basically fired everybody else except one guy. And then I didn't hire TV writers. I hired one TV writer because he was the head writer for Just Shoot Me. But everyone else, I hired a guy who had written columns about black barbershops. Another woman was a stand-up comic. A woman was a novelist. But they all told great stories. And I thought, well, I can show them how to do the structure of television writing, because that is the most, there's a film I'm about to go to New Orleans to do, and I read the script, and it was just beginning, middle, and end. It was like a really satisfying book. On the last page, I finished it, and I was like, it's like a complete meal. And so, it really is. Any hit film, a hit TV show, it always comes down to the writing. You can't make a bad script good. You can make a good script bad.
Yeah.
But you can't. No matter, it's like when you see if it's a really good movie, you don't go, oh, you got to go see it. It's great special effects, or like if someone says, oh, you got to see this movie, it's great acting. It's like, nah, it should be. If people are going, oh man, you won't believe this, the guy, he kills his brother. If they're talking about the story, you want to go see it, and that's movies like Jaws and all those great films. It's Indiana Jones. It's great stories. And that's why I like, what's her name? J.K. Rowling has had such success, because those books were just such. I remember the first time I picked up a Harry Potter book, got to the end of the first chapter, and it was like a little cliffhanger. So you go to the next chapter. And she's just really good at, and a good story. There's no replacing a good story.
No, I agree. And one of the things you just said is, one of the people you hired, I feel like stand-up comedians are some of the best storytellers, because that's what they do night in and night out, right? You're in front of the crowd. They're recanting personal memories or recalling personal memories or stories that make you laugh. They are the best. And the detail is so rich when they tell these stories, Steve.
Yeah, and they're brave, too.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing about a writer. You don't want to write safe, like, oh, what did they want? I remember when they hired me, Tyler's executive producer said to me, don't write what you think I want or what Tyler wants. Write what you want to see. And it's like playing with G.I. Joes again. It's like, okay, so G.I. Joe comes in, and there's Ken that I stole from my sister, and he's going to be the victim. And you're making and that's it. It's just, what would I like to see on TV? And what,
Yeah.
And I always said our job was not to please, well, you got to make the boss happy. But it's that lady who worked for, 11 hours today, and she got home, and she just wants to forget about her troubles for half an hour. And make her laugh or make her cry or make her, that's the important thing, is that audience.
No, that is so well said. And have you ever been in a role, Steve, where you may have not followed, because you have a very lengthy filmography for those listening, where you might have not followed the show, early on or at all, but once you got the part, you were so intrigued and loved the story that you followed it after the role was completed?
Yeah, and it's oftentimes though it's really fun. Like for Walking Dead, I had been a fan from day one, even though I was not a zombie fan. So there's that fun of when you see a show and then you go, and I'm trying to think of what's something I did I hadn't really seen. God, my poor little brain.
Well, if it comes up later, yeah. But
yeah,
I've always wanted to ask somebody that, because there's so much going on in your life, and whether it's you've got one job after the next, and you're very busy, so even the time to do that, I would imagine, is tough sometimes.
Well, it's odd because early in an acting career, it's not job after job after job. It's job. Go do some carpentry, go wait tables, go wash dishes, go drive a truck. And so when it finally does become that, it's really odd because I think, but like anyone, if you like your job, and like for an actor, sometimes they'll say, "Hey, how was your weekend?" It's like, I wasn't working. I'd rather be working, because you sort of live for the time. I mean, I have a wonderful family. I love being home, but I would love to work. And so you're like looking forward. I remember only once in my life that I work in an office for 1 month in New York City, and I couldn't breathe. And I understand that, people who have like a steady, good, secure job, they can't understand someone wanting to be a musician or an actor and that kind of uncertainty. And it's really nerve-wracking. Like when I had like a little, 2-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son, it's nerve-wracking when you have no work coming in. So now it's like as my partner said, jump on it, ride it while it's good.
That's tough. That's tough pressure. And I did want to talk about some of the things in your filmography. I'm really fascinated by a few of the things. The first of which is First Man. Damien Chazelle, great director, very underrated film. People think it's dark. I think it's perfect. I absolutely love it. I go to IMDb, the score is 7.3. I'm like, how is this the case? This movie's, I absolutely adore this movie. And it really puts, I feel like many movies, they make outer space and going into that next frontier, it's just so, not simple, but they kind of, when those 3 astronauts burn up, that this was hell on earth trying to get this thing underway. You were Gunter Wendt. He's the last guy that the astronauts saw. Is it more difficult, Steve, portraying somebody that's actually existed versus creating something that out of your own mind?
Well, it's what the fun thing I really like about, if you play someone who's really alive, is you have so much research available to you. Mm-hmm. And even though, you're still going off of the script, because most of the stuff you learn, because Gunter, he's sort of like Where's Waldo. He pops up here and there. But one of the biggest fun things of again, someone who's real is you can, he wrote a memoir, and so many people talked about him. So you get to learn a whole lot about something you had because as a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. I remember watching the funerals of those 3 guys in 1967. But I didn't know about that stuff. And this guy who had been there through all the, for Gemini and Apollo. And so I got an insight, and you're reading all these obscure interviews and articles and like his memoir. To find it was like out of print, so I had to order it from some bookseller somewhere, and then you get to peek into this guy's life. And even though no one will even know the research you've done, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like a bonus to getting to do it. And you have, and it doesn't have to come as much from you, because I knew I could see what he looked like, the way he stood. He had a little slouch, and all this stuff, and it just makes it. And then plus, a little off topic, but on the set of that film, they recreated, they had the actual, it looked like the actual Mercury capsule. So as a kid, I was like a little kid in a candy shop, just getting to look in and see it. And then the Apollo capsule and all the, everything, because they had every little detail was so specific. But yeah, it is funner. I think it's a little easier, I think, because you have so much material right in front of you. Whereas if it's someone, a fictional character, you really only have the script, which is usually really great. And oftentimes you don't have to do other research, but you get that bonus when it's a real person, because you get to study, like if you're doing a Civil War thing or doing I've gotten to learn about physics and, Dutch history. And so you get to learn a whole lot in kind of a concentrated time. So it's really kind of, you get to know a little bit. You're very good at trivia at bars and things. So
yeah. It is. So it is dark in a sense that it makes it real. You appreciate so much more what these guys. I mean, even Gosling's face when Neil Armstrong's face. Like you get a sense that these guys went through. And I don't want to sound too repetitive, but these guys paid a price to get NASA to that point. And there's a beauty in that. Like even the cinematography, the reflections, the sound, it is a really underrated, just a phenomenal movie, Steve.
Yeah, I agree. It really is, because it's probably the most realistic portrayal of those situations in that time in history of anything. These were mechanical machines. There was a computer, which, I think there's more gigs of info in our iPhones than were on those ships.
Wow.
On those spaceships. But you see how small they were. Like the Mercury capsule is the most claustrophobic thing I've ever seen. The fact that they'd be in there for, oh my God. And Apollo, the same thing. They can't walk around.
Right.
And it's like, the shooting, it's pretty astonishing.
And the way they shot that scene, Steve, and the door just pops at the end, it almost feels like a punch in a gut. Like, what a beautiful movie. Great. Yeah. I want to get your thoughts. And I was thinking about this, I was doing research on you. What do you think of the billionaires that we've been reading about in the news recently that are going into quote-unquote outer space? Is that a good thing? Because I know you're a fan of astronauts, and I said, I don't know if I should ask him this. I'll throw it out there. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? How should people look at this? Because I'm all for anything that gets us to that next level. But I don't know. Is it about the people themselves? Is it about doing something for others? What is this?
Yeah, it's a tough call, because it's always exciting, when they go into space and stuff. But and a lot of knee-jerk reactions were like, well, how about we put all those billions of dollars into education and inner cities, and so I'm kind of torn. I know those guys do also contribute,
right?
So the side of me that's like that human spirit of like, you could do that what you want with your money, and it is kind of exciting. Of like, that is the next step, and so I'm kind of torn about. And I know that was the thing about the Apollo program. They were like, we've got a Vietnam War going on, and we've got hunger in the streets, and so I'm kind of split. I'm really inspired by the human spirit. These are guys that just, built rockets. They hired a lot of smart people. And so that's kind of exciting. And but then again, you do go, man, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems we can solve with that money.
That's true. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Conjuring movies. My dad and I bonded to these. We absolutely love them. I had Eugenie Bondurant, who was also in The Devil Made Me Do It, just one of my favorite movies of the year. Talk about the differences, Steve, between because you've been in this franchise for a while now. James Wan and Michael Chaves. What are the differences between the two? Are they vastly different? Are they kind of on the same page? Just talk about those two, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think they're actually really on the same page, and I think that's why James passed the baton to Michael, because what they both have is this childlike enthusiasm. They're bouncing off the walls. They love making movies, and they particularly like making horror films because they're such fans. And James was just like, he really knew how to scare people, but in a genuine way, not in a movie way. I mean, he was kind of a master of the craft of filmmaking, but he also really knew, he hadn't forgotten what it's like to be an audience, and what, they expect a certain amount of jump scares, but they got to be original. But then he also knew how to go dig deep, which I think, Stephen King kind of does the same thing, can really dig deep and find out what's that thing, that real story thing that's going to get you. And I think it's one of the reasons that the Conjuring movies kind of cross over to not just horror fans, because horror fans are great and they're so loyal, but that because of the stories are so good, they jumped over, and that's why they've done so well. But Michael has that same infectious enthusiasm. Like after a good take, he would just be like a little kid, like, "Oh, that was so good! Oh, that was so cool! That was so cool!" Or he'd want to show me. Like I went to visit him. I was in Los Angeles. We shot The Conjuring 3 in Atlanta, but I was out in Los Angeles, and he said, "Oh, you got to come by. I want to show you something." So I went over to the studio where he was editing, and he wanted to show me the opening sequence, which is the exorcism.
Oh.
But it was the same way, it was like someone would say, "I want to show you my new bike. It's got these cool brakes, and wait till you see this." And I put my baseball cards in the spokes, and yeah. So that's the same thing of like everyone's deadly serious about making the thing and working really hard. That goes back to type of movie crews. It's hard to find a group of people that work as hard. But they take it seriously. But again, there's a sense of fun to it. Like, hey, we're not working in a lawyer's office. We're making a movie. It's supposed to be fun.
And Steve, what's insane about that opening scene is, and I couldn't believe it when Eugenie brought it up and I read it, is that was a contortionist, the actor. That wasn't CGI, that's even more freaky.
Very little CGI, and actually, and another thing, that it was to be standing right there. It was like, oh my god. It was like, that's not CGI. And also the table. This is really funny. The table that's rocking and bouncing up and down. That's not with cables or CGI. It's two big grip guys, Teamster guys, under there, like you do in elementary school to make the table shake. There's these two big guys just shaking the table.
Wow.
And, so there's a lot of that. There's just a lot of, not a heck of a lot of CG in that. A lot of it's practical. And James Wan's the same way. They do stuff like when we got thrown back, it was where I'm on a little wagon being pulled by two guys with a rope. And it's not blue screen or green screen or any screen. It's just a wooden wagon.
Christopher Nolan would absolutely love that.
I was just thinking, he does this. A lot of his stuff is practical.
Yeah. And Father Gordon's just, I've heard you say he's to evil what Commissioner Gordon is to Batman. I totally agree with that. Patrick Wilson and Vera have to be a lot of fun to work with. And we talk about, and I love how you brought this up. I'm not a big horror movie fan. Why I love The Conjuring is because, like you said, it's got a great story to it. It's not just, okay, slash them up, here's horror, be scared. It's got a heart to it. It's got a story. It's going somewhere. You want to see the next one as soon as, the one you're watching is done. That's what I think makes The Conjuring special, Steve.
Yeah, it's funny because I am not a horror fan. It's not like I look down at it all. They just scare me. I don't like it. I don't mind. Like, I think I saw it in theaters, and I saw Conjuring 2 in a theater with my daughter. But like, I remember when I did like Insidious 2, and they sent me a screener because I had you do the press for a movie, and I had to know what the heck I was talking about. But I had to watch it in the middle of the day on my laptop with the windows, the curtains pulled open and sunshine pouring in. But I don't like getting scared.
Just a few more here that I wanted to touch on. Banshee, you're like my fourth or fifth guest from that show. I feel like, Steve, that this is the best show on any streaming network that people just don't talk about. I feel like it should be mentioned in the same breath. They're not the same type of shows, but as Breaking Bad, I really feel like it's that good.
Yeah, it's funny because it was like, and it was almost comic book like in terms of its extremes. But the thing that show did really well is, to compare it to Breaking Bad, is the hero, he's very rarely in the clear. As soon as he solves one thing, there's another bigger, badder thing. There's another bigger, badder guy. He gets rid of one bad guy, and there's this constant tension, which they work really hard. And it's one of the reasons I think the creator wanted to end it. He goes, if I keep it going, it's going to start getting fake and manipulated, which I thought was really cool because you can't really sustain. You don't have 10 seasons of Breaking Bad. You're not going to have 10 seasons of Banshee. It gets a little old. And what they did really well with that is, again, just great, fun, original characters. And
I tell you, a show that has moved me so much. I think the world of it. Another quickly underrated movie, Flight with Denzel. Again, you had a scene with him. I'm not sure how much of it they included. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I absolutely love Flight. And I've had other guests, Steve, say that he's soft spoken on set. Like, you really can't hear a lot of what he's saying. Is there any truth to that? Like,
Yeah, well, he's so God. It was funny because doing Flight, it was kind of odd. Because I started out on it. I was hired to be Kelly's dialect coach because she's British and she had to do a Texas dialect. And then they auditioned and I did this part. And I didn't, it was just, I'm playing the NTSB board president at the long hearing, which is like the last 25 minutes of the movie. But so I got to watch Denzel Washington act for like 4 days in a row because that whole long hearing scene, that took a lot of shooting to do. And yeah, he's very soft-spoken. He's so prepared. Like he has this long speech and he must have done it, good Lord, 50 times. And almost every time he found it a little different. And it's funny you said that because I was at a hotel, I think I was up in Canada, and it happened to be on, and I thought, well, let me just I was going to watch like 5 minutes, the opening scenes where it's, where they have the plane mishap. But I ended up watching the whole thing, and not because I was in the darn thing. But he, and curiously, because his work, he's one of those actors, one of the handful that really have inspired me over the years. That you go when acting starts getting too hard, or you get kind of bitter, or you work with jerks. There's actors like that have that integrity and make it seem like a valid thing to do for a living. And it was, I think, my last day of shooting. Oddly enough, we crossed paths in the restroom. We're both washing our hands. And we ended up having like this, 25-minute talk in the men's room, just about what he had meant and what his integrity meant, and talking about some of the things he and I had in common with this character he was playing. And yeah, just an absolute professional. But very, very soft-spoken. It's interesting in films now. And it's harder for like theater actors making the transition to film acting. You really don't talk really loudly at all. There's no need to project. And he's very quiet, but very real and so prepared, so prepared.
So when you watch him and you're like kind of admiration, I would suppose that's the only word I could think of. Are you learning as well? I mean, is there something he's doing that from an actor's point of view, you're like, geez, that's really well. I love.
Oh yeah, you watch because you're watching at certain parts of the text, like, okay, he's not blinking here, and you notice like, what is that? You always, as an actor, you're always like anything. Like as an athlete, you see some guy that's, man, he hits a really good, he can really pull to right field. What's he doing? Because I can't pull to right field. And things like that. Why is that guy's jump shots? Why are they so consistent? So you find out what they do, or you pick up stuff. And that's what, as an actor, and someone like that, where like, again, I was literally just facing him for 3 or 4 days. And you just watch those little things like, oh, he's moving a little more here. That's because his train of thought is a little shaky. And so, and it's things he's either consciously or unconsciously doing, but you put that in your little memory bank, and I recently had to play a guy who has a lot of power, and I realized people with a lot of power, they just don't move. And you look at, use Denzel Washington. I remember seeing The Equalizer. There's a character that's supremely powerful and confident. He doesn't, he's pretty still. And so and I remember seeing people, I forget who was it, Anthony Hopkins, his stillness or his not blinking. It's really, so you pick up these little things along the way. But someone like a Denzel Washington, you pick up a lot. So
yeah, that's well said. And I'm gonna, before we touch upon a few of your future projects, I did want to end the interview with The Walking Dead. Our beloved show ends its final season. Before we get into that, just talk about. I know you guys have had a long friendship with Melissa McBride. Just talk about that, because I think she was if I'm correct, Steve, she was a casting director for a while, and then she got back into acting. Is that?
Yeah, I first met her. We were doing a thing. God, this is like 20 years ago. God, 91, 2000. No, that's 30 years ago. Good God. We were doing it was a thing they called a dark night. And we would go, we'd write original scripts and some music stuff. And we would go into a theater because we didn't have our own theater. And dark night is Monday night. There's nothing goes on Monday night. So we would rent out a big theater and do this original work. And she was a friend of one of the guys, Chad Pittard, who became a good friend of mine. And she was doing like videography. She had one of those big VHS camcorders, and she was just doing a little behind the scenes stuff. And then I ended up taking an acting class with her. So this is like early 90s. And I remember thinking, who is this? She was such a natural, good actor. But she was also very painfully shy. I remember I cast her once. We were doing a reading of a new screenplay. And she was very nervous to be in front of people. And I've known a lot of really good actors are very, very shy. And then we sort of lost touch for a while, and that's when she was a casting director that everybody loved because as an actor, she knew how to talk to actors. And then I remember thinking, God, why doesn't she act more? Because she was just so good. And then she ended up doing, Frank Darabont did The Mist, and which I think he wrote that part for her, whatever. And then it led to The Walking Dead, and now it's kind of odd because for anyone to achieve fame, I think it's the last thing she ever wanted. That's just not her personality. So it must be, and also because the character she played has such an effect on especially women, because the struggles that character went through, they really identified with her, and that's a tough burden when there's a lot of people that want her attention, I imagine. Yeah. But she's great.
Yeah, beautifully said. And you mentioned Frank Darabont, talk about a genius. So let me ask you, we talk about Reg Monroe, guy that kind of is not really in touch with what's going on outside his own little, area. He meets an iconic end with, Drunken Pete, Michonne's sword. He's avenged by Rick Grimes, which not everyone is. Just true. Talk about your time you spent in that role. I mean, a lot of people love this show. They adore the show. They adore the characters. Reg being one. Steve, just talk a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah, it really was a dream come true. I mean, literally, because it's like being a Yankee fan and getting to play, with Derek Jeter, or with me going way back, Horace Clark and Roy White. But yeah, because I'd watched the show, like I said, I reluctantly watched the first episode thinking, well, I'm just curious. And then when Rick killed that little zombie girl, I went, holy crap, what is this? And then I just became a huge fan. And so, you get the audition, and like a lot of series that keep their stories under wraps, it's a disguised scene. And I think it had the character I was reading was hosting a cocktail party in New York for this famous author, but it ended up being that scene in the series where Reg and Deanna throw a little party to welcome, the Rick and his group to Alexandria. And that was the first thing I shot. And it's funny because as an actor, you're very prepared and you know your lines and thoughts and things. But inside, I'm going, there's Rick. Oh, there's Michonne. Oh, is Daryl going to be here? And even like there's Carol, not there's Melissa, my friend. It's so odd because you've been watching these, because one thing about TV is it gets in your head and it becomes like your show. Like people who watch Friends, it's like, yeah, 20 million people watch it, but it feels like it's your show.
Oh, that's so well said.
Well, that's it, and so it was a really weird feeling of being a huge fan and also acting with these guys. And they are so, one of the things that's very unnerving to an actor is coming into a successful series. I had to do the same thing with House of Cards a few years later. Before all the hullabaloo. Yeah. But with Walking Dead, here's this big hit show, and it's like, and I thought, these, you don't know what you're going to get in terms of the cast. Going into ninth grade, is everyone already going to be friends? But they knew that actors coming in were nervous and had butterflies. And again, going back to the character, Andy Lincoln, he was the first to welcome me, and it was like. And they all, like in a lot of shoots, people during breaks, they go back to their trailers. But there, they just hung out on the steps in between shots and just talked. And what'd you guys do? Oh, did you know there's this great place to go hiking? And Stephen Yeun, I think it was like my second day there. And this was towards the end of the season when I was doing the show, like the last 3 months. It was like September, October, November. And this is the end of the season. And those guys have been shooting every day all summer. And he's borrowing someone's bike to go get muffins for the makeup and hair people.
Wow.
In Sonoya. And that's just kind of, how they were. So it was just like it was, and I was lucky in a sense that I've had friends who were on the show for like 5 years, but they'd get a scene every 4 or 5 episodes. Whereas Reg, I got to sort of go in, do several episodes, and then I got when Scott Gimple called me to tell me I was going to die, because you've heard that everyone gets the call. And he said, but I promise it's going to be really, really cool. It's the last scene of the finale. And it was like, and he kept his word. It was like, yeah, that's pretty. I couldn't have asked for a better way to go out. And it was the last day of shooting of the season too, so it was a big goodbye to everybody. And yeah, but it was fun. It was great. I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah, Stephen, I have to say, no. I've interviewed many actors. No show embraces new cast the way The Walking Dead does. I mean,
they're just great. They're just it sounds very corny, but it's like a family, and no egos. What I didn't see. I remember talking to one of the producers, and I mentioned that, and he said, "Yeah, people with egos don't last very long here."
And one of the cool things is I always think it's cool if somebody has a Topps card or action figures. You have a Topps card, which I think is really cool.
I know that's insane. I mean, and the only thing I was really tickled about was not like, was that because I had Topps baseball cards as a kid, so yeah. I didn't get a. I'm not on a baseball team, but I did get a card.
Yeah, and let me tell you. What is something about The Walking Dead and fandom that struck you? Because I know you used to go to Comic Cons when we had those and I went to a ton of these. I've been to Georgia, and the way the fans gravitate to this cast, you included. What struck you about that experience, or perhaps just in general? Because I really feel like the fans are so grateful to the cast when they see them at Comic Cons.
Yeah, and it's odd, and we're really grateful to them because I'd never experienced anything like that kind. Like I think before my episodes aired, I had like 16 Twitter followers. I'm not exaggerating, and all of a sudden, there's people from Japan and South Africa and Brazil, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's a show that the people just. It wasn't about zombies. It was about this group of people trying to get through all these problems. And again, the writers do a great job of throwing one problem after another problem after another problem. You have one bad guy, and then you get Negan for a few seasons, and then you get the Whisperers, and it's like, and I think it's a group of people that all share that feeling like this is my show. And they're not, geeky or anything. They're just incredibly kind. And they know this show better than I ever did. They're like, "Oh, remember this?" And I was like, "No, I don't remember that." And I remember one time I was in London, and I hadn't gotten to see much of the town, but it was the end of the second day, I think, and I got on a train, and I didn't really know where I was going, but everyone on the train had been at the convention. They sort of adopted me and said, "Well, where do you want to go? We're going to get you there." And it was, but it's this overt kindness, and the cosplay stuff is crazy. I don't quite understand that, but it's really creative. And I guess it's just a way of just, they get, if it wasn't for all those people that are watching the show, the show would not be what it is. And so there's one of the reasons we sort of feel a debt to talk to everybody who comes up. And because to them it's theirs, and because I if I read a book I really like, I feel like, again, going back to that thing of this is my book. They wrote this for me. And it's not an ego thing. It's just that, when something really hits a chord, a real true story chord in you, it means something. And so it's really rare you get to go out and talk to the people that help pay your mortgage, basically.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you talked about earlier about how we talked about how the show embraces new cast. I almost feel like you're right. It's our own little story. It's our own little world where the show itself has embraced its fans, that's kind of in a different way, but the same way. I think it's really sweet. I want to touch upon some future projects you have.
Yeah.
We Have a Ghost. For those listening, man claims he's befriended a ghost who looks like Ernest Borgnine. David Harbour, Jennifer Coolidge, who's fantastic in White Lotus, by the way. Anthony Mackie. What can you say? Because this sounds as good a premise as I've heard in a while.
When I wrote a note to the director saying this is kind of a cross between Sugarland Express and E.T. It's because I thought initially they asked me to audition and I turned it down because I thought it was a horror film, and I thought I don't want to do another horror film right now. That's I don't want to get pigeonholed. And then my managers called and said, "No, you really need to take a look at this." And I'm so glad because it's so good-hearted. It's really the script is really funny, and I can say I'm not a good person in the movie.
And that's not something that that's not kind of the. I mean, you're a very eclectic actor, but usually you're not the.
Not the heavy. So it's really fun. I get to be a bad guy.
Yeah,
and I can't wait. I head there on Monday for about a month, so I can't wait.
Oh, that's very exciting. El Tonto, which I think is Charlie Day's directorial debut. Also, Kate Beckinsale, Jason Sudeikis. What can you say about that?
Yeah, not this. They're just waiting to release it. It's crazy because again, I got this audition a few years ago, and it was for this British film director who was very eccentric, and I thought they're not going to cast me. I mean, I'm Canadian American, and first of all, because most of the parts were like cameos of like you said, Jason Sudeikis and Adrian Brody, Kate Beckinsale. And I thought they're going to get a British guy, and they're going to get a British guy who's more recognizable. So I just sent off the tape, and strangely enough, they offered me the role. But the thing is, it was shooting at the exact same time in Los Angeles as Annabelle Comes Home was shooting, and that Patrick and Vera and I were doing a couple scenes in. But they worked it out so I could do both things, which was so much fun. And it's very, very funny whenever it comes out. It's most fun I've had. I got to hang out with Ray Liotta for several days because I play the director of this movie within the movie, and he plays the producer of the movie within a movie. And yeah, I was just like, I was getting another one of those cases of, you're looking around going, I've seen every one of his movies and every one of her movies. And, so you're also, again, being a fan. And
boy, the more you talk, the more jealous I'm getting of the kid that played until the lights went out. I could listen to you talk forever. What great stories. My last comment, I got to tell you, Last Looks from the premise seems phenomenal. Mel Gibson, Charlie Hunnam, Morana Baccarin. Anything you could say about that?
Yeah, I play this sort of. We're not sure because the storyline I did may not be in the movie anymore, but who cares? It may go back because it was funny that Michael Chav said that in the that scene in the Conjuring 3 where you see I get out of the car and it's just like The Exorcist.
Yes, that's the homage they paid to The Exorcist.
Oh yeah,
yes,
But he cut that for a while because they wanted to get right to the exorcism. But then I guess they did a preview or something, and it went back in.
Oh, good.
And so that may happen with this. But the one, with Mel Gibson and stuff, it's just a great. It's kind of like an L.A. Confidential kind of a real noir kind of thriller, which they don't make very much anymore. And the director Tim, he did like Brockmire, does a lot of comedy, but this is sort of more dramatic in action, but it's pretty cool. I have one of the coolest directors. He's great.
I loved speaking with you, and I am so grateful for all your time. You are just a good dude, and I hope you come back on down the road.
Yeah, let's stay in touch. Yeah, I really enjoyed talking with you.